Hello everyone and welcome back to Behindthetrowel. My name is Natasha Bilson, aka Tash_Archeo. We have a very special live stream today as we discuss the Great British Dig episode 4 of series 2. Wow, already episode 4. Oh my goodness, and we go to the beautiful Beningbrough Hall. First off, let's do quick introductions of the team that we have today. And actually all of us were on screen. Chris, I did technically see you, so you were on screen. Really? I saw you in the background. You were sitting on a chair having your lunch with the other team.
Yeah. That would be about right. That would be about right.
So, Chris, please, as I've just introduced you, there you go.
Thanks.
What do you do in the program?
Yes, so my name's Chris Scott. I'm one of the directors at Solstice Heritage, and we provide a lot of the archaeological backing for the series. So we do a lot of the research on the different sites that we look at within the program. We then do a lot of the actual digging on site, and then we look after all of the sort of a lot of the post-excavation work along with other colleagues to write up all the work afterwards, so that we sort of manage the archaeology. And I'm involved in managing the site from an archaeological point of view and eating lunch.
Making sure everyone actually gets lunch is very important.
Very important.
And every crew is, it's like a zombie apocalypse. You've got to be careful. You don't want to get any angry archaeologists or TV crew. Bad combo.
Definitely.
Marcus, please, quick introduction.
Hi, I'm Marcus. I work on the show producing visualizations based on information that comes in from the trenches, historical documents and things like that, and basically try to wrap it all together into a three-dimensional presentation.
Beautiful, by the way, beautiful this week. And we have, actually, let's do Chloe and then we'll go to Mark after. Chloe.
Mark's the guest of honor. So I'm Chloe, and I guess I co-present the show with Tash, as well as digging, and basically getting to do all the fun bits and not do so much of the recording and stuff. So it's great.
And last but not least, we have a very special guest, and I'm actually really excited that we have Mark and Newman on the Great British Dig live stream, live Q&A show. Woo! I'm actually, honestly, just want to say I was not that enthusiastic about digging a garden, because I was like, oh, it's a garden. I mean, beautiful view, but what are we going to get? Oh, I was wrong. And
we were really rude about it beforehand, me and Tash. We were like, oh, I'm dreading this one. I'm so sorry. I take it all back. It was just
it's the place for honesty, this, isn't it? I don't know. So
please introduce yourself to the world.
Well, being introduced as a guest of honor and bigged up like this is fantastic. I think cheap local turn is probably more apposite. But I'm Mark Newman, and I'm the National Trust's archaeologist on the east side of our Great North region. So I help and advise the property teams on National Trust properties from Marsden Moor, which is up on the Pennine watersheds, running up to the borders of Greater Manchester. It's kind of the bottom right corner, up to little parcels of land at Berwick upon Tweed. So about 5.5 hours from one end of the territory to the other, about 75 National Trust properties across that area. I've been working for the Trust since 1988. So almost year 34. I know what you're thinking. How can that possibly be true? And of course, it's because my parents were wedded to the concept of child labour, and I was indeed an infant phenomenon. So here I am, done 34 years, and I'm only 28. Love it. I mean, I my first job with the Trust was working at Fountains Abbey and Studley Royal, the World Heritage Site, and I got to live there for 7 years. So for 7 years, Fountains Abbey was my back garden. Other back gardens have been a bit of a disappointment since, it has to be said. And Fountains is a great love of mine. But as I say, 75 properties across that area, one of which is Beningbrough. And Beningbrough was the first property I was lent to when I started back in 1988. Supposed to be working at Fountains, and other places started borrowing me. And so I've been doing bits and pieces there ever since.
And you have a book, I think, based on Fountains, right?
Oh, I have a book. Yes, I do. And there's probably a copy of it sitting here within reach. So
this is not state by the way. Like I just
sort of
remembered
plug. You know, I mean, I'm never. It's rather like rats in London. I'm never further than 6 feet away from a copy. But yes, Wonder of the North, the definitive history of Fountains Abbey and Studley Royal. Very beautiful and the perfect gift for all your loved ones.
I will link in the description as well for everyone. I will do that actually, because I did see that book. I remember looking at it when we were filming. Hence why I remember it.
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, it's all my own work, Governor. So that's kind of about me, and just had my best week of the year without any doubt, working with all of you at Beningbrough. And that's not, you know, I'm sure they say you say that to all the podcasts, but it is actually true. It was a funny old year last year for everyone, and you know, working with you was definitely one of the very good bits. So fantastic to see it all out on air last night.
It was, and wow, what an episode. I mean, first off, before we even get into the episode as such, Chris, why did Solstice Heritage, you and Jim, pitch the idea to base a dig and then subsequently an episode at Beningbrough Hall?
First of all, we actually we work on other projects normally outside of the Great British Dig with Mark occasionally, and Mark and I have known each other for a long time. So all of our work and all of the episodes that we film are based often on the sites and the interest that we think is within sites are almost always based on other people's work. And in this instance, it's based almost entirely on my learned friend's work at Beningbrough. But we, in discussion with Mark, we sort of looked at Beningbrough and thought there was a lot of obviously fabulous archaeology there for a start and a great story. But apart from anything, we thought that what a lovely opportunity to look at the biggest, poshest, most massive back garden that the Great British Dig has ever had the chance to dig in. And we thought it'd be a lovely opportunity to do something a little bit different for this particular show, and in that sense have the opportunity to sort of look at a really, really fascinating landscape in a bit more detail and over a bit more of a large area in one space.
Yeah, it definitely was a fantastic site actually, and I'm glad that Chloe and I were proved wrong and that this was a fascinating site. I mean, it was beautiful. We knew it would be a beautiful place to dig. And it's kind of felt like a bit like a holiday, just because of how beautiful it was. And just, wow, being able to work somewhere like the National Trust. For anyone who doesn't know what the National Trust is, Mark, could you just quickly summarise the function of it? And yeah.
So National Trust was founded in 1895 by a group of 4 philanthropists and social activists who were concerned that Britain was being paved over. The Industrial Revolution was ruining all of our landscapes, and that people needed places to breathe and to be inspired by beauty. And they set up the trust. So it was an organisation that could take on ownership of beautiful and historically important places and look after them in perpetuity. And one of the founders was a legislator, and he drafted and put through the 1907 National Trust Act, so that there's a process called inalienability, that if we take a place on, once it's been declared inalienable, we cannot choose to sell it. And if something like HS2 comes along and that has cut corners off some National Trust estates as the first section of that is being built, they actually have to pass an act of Parliament to alienate the land that the government decide to take away. So we're a totally safe set of hands. And one of those strap lines that we use a lot is National Trust forever for everyone. And the 1907 Act says very clearly that we preserve and conserve places of natural beauty or outstanding historic importance for the benefit of the nation. And that's what our core task is. So it started off with little bits of land and occasional historical buildings. It was a fairly small scale organisation until the 20s, and then it's really started to expand. So we're now one of the biggest landowners in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. There's a separate national trust for Scotland because their legislative structure was different and they didn't have a national trust until the 1930s. So the stuff we tend to be, in the public imagination is very much, around country house visits and pretty afternoon teas and things that smell vaguely of lavender. But the reality is that we manage, as well as 300 plus historic properties, enormous tracts of countryside and especially coastline. So in the 1960s, Enterprise Neptune was set up so that the trust could raise funds to acquire sections of unspoilt coastline. It's about a third of the coastline of England and Wales that we're now involved with. So we're big landowners. Lots and lots of historical and archaeological sites gathered up in that, but the trust also has a focus with nature, and that's very prominent in our thinking at the moment, how our land can contribute to nature recovery, and increasingly how we're focused on the climate change crisis, including an organisational objective to plant 20 million trees before 2030. So there's a lot going on, a lot that enshrines and promotes and encourages access and provides access to heritage. But, our big challenge is now how we bring that alongside our environmental challenges. And we're going to be looking in a great deal of detail about how that is done successfully to the benefit of broader society. There you go. That's a bit sort of eyes on distant horizon, isn't it?
Well, thank you for that, because a lot of people won't even know what National Trust is if they're not based in the UK. And actually, I remember from a young age, I don't feel like National Trust targets. I know they target 18 to 25-year-olds, and this is really hard demographic to target. So I kind of hope that programs such as the Great British Dig being there actually gets their attention as well. Like, I really do hope so, because it's a membership fee based thing. To visit the sites, you've got to pay. And that just helps the upkeep, and people like Mark doing a fabulous job. Now,
and we kind of like you're right, members get into all of our properties for an annual membership fee, or you can pay to visit them properties on an individual basis. But actually, a lot of our land holding is free public access, and we hold it on that basis. The historic houses, not so much, but the great countryside tracts most certainly are on that basis. But what we really want is to take people with us, and that their membership fee is not kind of a transactional payment so much as a commitment to the cause of conservation. That's where we want to take people to, that they care about their environment and looking after it, and that's where we're at.
Join it.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much, Mum. It's much like the old AA men. I think I have to stand and salute when I see a membership card.
Gosh, I think I remember when it was my first international dig after graduating from uni. I went to Germany with Professor Tim Darville's project, actually. So shout out to Professor Tim. And yeah, I think I applied to do, I forgot what it was, like the board, National Trust board thing, where you have like people of different ages. I didn't get it, but I just remember that now after seeing your membership card there, Chloe. Memories. I think that National Trust historically good as well.
I also think, I'm not even sure I broke even that week, because our kind of unit base where all our kit was above the shop. It was just hideously tempting.
Was on your hat from the shop? Did you buy that hat? That hat was from the shop, wasn't it?
I bought that hat, yeah, because it was so hot. And then, we were just out in the glaring sun. It was so, I don't think it comes across on camera how hot it was. I mean, it looks sunny, but it was baking.
Yeah, it really was.
And in the tent as well. Every time I went in the tent, it was like being inside a sort of, I don't know, an oven. It wasn't damp enough for that. It's just like intense.
I remember my trousers, they're like had waterproof lining in it. I was dying. I remember I just remember just dying inside. But anyway, we had some comments in the comment section. I just want to say shout out to Nigel, Phil, Conan, thank you for commenting, and hello, and past preservers as well. And funny enough, we're talking about how hot it was. Well, Nigel goes, it seemed like a very happy family in fabulous weather in a fabulous garden on a fabulous National Trust property, and it was just very, very hot.
I'm so glad that came over, because it really just was genuinely a really special week, and I was hoping it would capture that. And thank you for that, Nigel. That's great to know that landed.
But actually, as well, Nigel goes on to say, he says quite a few things, actually. I'll read them all because I like it. Okay, he goes, love the Beningbrough Hall dig. Sometimes pictures don't lie. Sometimes they don't. Aren't bricks brilliant? They are a bit like coins, so many variables, all of which can be dateable, a fascinating subject to study. Yes. I think we can like cut that and then just put that in like an advert for any CBM specialists,
Yeah.
I want to do CBM, yeah. Or just like, I feel like that should be like the tag for the Great British Dig, because there's so many more episodes to come where it's all about bricks. It's very brick heavy episodes.
This is the first of the big brick hitters, isn't it? This is the first of the brick, yeah.
What, wasn't this one of the last episodes that we shot that had like a substantial amount of bricks? I mean, this had the brick tax brick, which was very cool. We all got excited over that one. That's very cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I think
They're
the
still in
last
Mecca by
episode in the
car.
series is quite bricky.
Oh,
really?
There's something to look forward to, definitely.
It's a very rich in brick goodness, and they're good bricks as well. They're good bricks. Like yours are good bricks as well. Don't worry. Some of the best bricks, I think.
I bet you say that to all the brickworks, Chloe.
Well, I mean, brick nerdery is a big theme in the Great British Dig, isn't it?
Yeah. Out of nowhere, I think we just like converted everyone, isn't it, to the bricks, worshipping the bricks. That's what we do. And actually, Nigel goes on to say, nice to get all the locals to come and be involved on the site, as you were not in their gardens on this one. And that's so true. Like, we did have the volunteers, we had staff, we had people who were visiting the site just come along, probably chatted to Marcus, as well as David in the Dig HQ tent. So it was just so nice to have everyone involved. And actually, I remember no matter where you walked, people would stop you. Oh, what's going on here? Like, you're digging. Yeah. Oh, and they're filming it as well. We're like, wow.
Yeah. And I'm not sure how. Sorry, Chloe, go on.
No, I was just going to say I got asked a lot of questions about vegetables and flowers, and I had to keep telling people I actually don't know. I'm sorry, I'm not a gardener.
I look like
the gardeners
a
actually looked a lot better turned out than we did. Yeah, I'm covered in dirt, but I don't work here. Okay.
No, I mean, I'm not sure how far it came through in the edit, but there were hundreds and hundreds of people passing through the site. The property was open normally. And that was yet another cherry on top of the cherries on top of the cake, was that there were so many people who picked up the vibe and got that engagement with what we were doing from passing through. And there's been a huge amount of communication with the property of people who were inspired by what we were doing, and the people who were slightly infuriated we weren't there on the Saturday. We talked them down, and I've done a little tour for one of them who at a later date. So we've supported that. So there's one person who's not an angry member. This is good. But it was that kind of compound. You can be in the hole getting involved with it, or the door knocking side of things, or that kind of slightly more vicarious, and both people are coming especially for it, or just stumbled across it, and it seems to have stayed with all of them.
I remember the cyclists. Oh my goodness, there's so many cyclists. I've never seen so many cyclists be by a National Trust site. I don't know if you guys remember. I was at the front, so I always saw them. So they'd always swing by, jump off their bikes, and then go back and cycle around.
It's nice and flat around there. It's kind of good thing for cycling. Yeah.
Well, Marcus, I haven't really asked you anything yet. And, I feel like I should. So you don't actually, you're not really in it this much, but we do see your work. Like, I did notice a few of your images where you really start to help Hugh's narration as he's explaining what's going on, and we start seeing the formation of the garden walls and everything like that. And how was this episode for you to create your model compared to other episodes? You actually had a painting in front of you, and as you said, it's taking that painting but into a digital form, which was just beautiful. So how was the experience?
Yeah, so we had two sources really. So we had the painting, which is of the front of the house with the potential stable blocks on either side, and we had the rear of the house, which was the garden design, or half the garden design. as Mark demonstrated with his mirror. So we did actually build a model of the building that we were trying to find, the stable block, but it wasn't. It didn't make the edit. But that does exist. So that was going to be. I remember we were flipping from the front to the back quite a lot to say which bits we were going to build. Are we going to design the formal garden? Are we going to do the stables based on the evidence that was coming out of the trenches? So your trench, Tash, where you didn't find the stable block, we switched to focusing on the rear. And then we decided to put the extra trench in to look for the stable block. So we switched back again to the front. So we ended up building multiple parts of the house and the garden. And then, so we started looking at the sketch and trying to interpret it. And Mark and I sat down and we went through quite a lot of contemporary designs and things. And I think one thing that it wasn't just a planted design, all of the geometric designs. There was, I think we said that some of those sweeps and stuff were probably different coloured gravels and things like that. So it's very much a kind of geometric, quite a mathematical thing, because once we sort of figured out what those might be and found the sort of examples, then had to try and work out what the geometry was that created those. So it had a little file with all the different geometric forms in to try and work out how that fitted into that space there. So it's quite challenging, and but I think it worked really well, and so it was quite nice. And in the end, I think what I ended up doing, I still had to build a model of the house as well, because the house is in the garden, isn't it? It's kind of the back of the house, so we had to build the back of the house, but we were working on that for the front anyway. So it's quite a lot to get done, and in the end essentially created the digital version of that sketch had it ever been etched up and or painted up and created into that. So we basically took that sketch from the sketchbook and turned it into something for the modern day.
I felt that Marcus was rather, was the equivalent of Judi Dench in Shakespeare in Love. We didn't see much of him, but it was good stuff when he did. And the reconstruction, has got everybody talking, and everybody's really loving that. And one of those ways, it's kind of been a real step change and a step up in how we understand the place. So that imagery is going to be with people for a long time.
No, I think it worked really well. I really liked it. I thought it's great. So if we had more time, we would have done more gardens. It's just expanded it out.
Because that's where I'd love to get to. I don't know if you know the engravings of great country estates done by engravers Kip and Kniff at the beginning of the 18th century, but they had this amazing technique of giving bird's eye perspectives, and you've got an image that perhaps had a blooming great kite, and one of them was strapped to it with his etching acid from height. But no, they worked out how to produce these images, and there isn't one for Beningbrough. But we're learning so much more about the detail of the archaeology now. It feels like we're inching closer to actually being able to produce what Kip and Kniff would have seen if they were around at the time. And that, I just think, would be fabulous if we can get to that point.
Because it is much bigger, isn't it, than the bit that I showed, considerably bigger. So it goes off in both directions, either side of the house. So
the gardens of compartments, and it's kind of the central compartment, but they're undoubtedly flanking to each side. Your first trench, Tash, was about really confirming to us that the gardens, extend almost as far on the north side of the house as they do on the south, and then it was bottomed off by the fine channel, as is written on that illustration. But there was a further little bit of garden on the other side of the channel, and then more away to the southeast again. So as you say, it's just one component of a whole lot that made this much bigger picture.
Yeah. May I pull that out actually, Tash? Because did the fine channel, it didn't really feature it, did it, in the edit?
No.
And it was actually, it's a nice one to mention, because we had Chris with us again, who's not this Chris, but a female Chris, who is, sort of soil scientist, geoarchaeologist, and she was with us before in Nottingham, and she was taking cores across this fine channel so that we could see the depth of it. And I think what I really liked about this one was that we had all these different techniques coming together. So we had the LiDAR, we had the geological coring, we had the magnetometry and the resistivity, which are both geophysical survey techniques. So we had all these, and then we had the trenches. So we had all these, the LiDAR's telling us the lie of the land. Then we've got geophysics looking underneath. And then we've got the coring taking samples, and the trenches are really samples as well. And we brought all of that together with the historical records, like the painting and everything. We had photographs of the garden I was digging in from the 19th century. So we knew what happened to it later, but we didn't know the early stuff. We brought all of that together. And that's what archaeology is, isn't it? It's a big detective work. And, you know, and we call it a CSI board when we sit down and dig HQ and look at all the different strands of evidence. But that's this episode and our dig at Beningbrough, I think, really put that across.
Yeah. I think from our point of view, this is one of those opportunities really that was so keen. We were so keen to make sure that the Great British Dig had a chance to do really was show that archaeology on a landscape scale particularly is best done with all of these forms of evidence together. And so it's great to have an opportunity to show that stuff really. It's that's really, really exciting as an archaeologist to sort of put that across to people as well, where despite the name of the show, you know, that everybody thinks that archaeology is digging, and actually it's so much more than that. So
yeah, and that's interesting because I kind of the mission that I'm on with archaeology in the organisation, it was really interesting to see that actually there is a place for excavation, because a lot of what I do is about trying to discourage my colleagues from impacting the archaeological resource, because once it's dug and it's gone forever. And I often say if I was really good at my job, then it would be incredibly boring because we'd never look at anything. Fortunately, I'm rubbish. So people are bashing holes left and right, and they're all opportunities to do the digging side of things. And one of the things I really loved about the programme is some of the trenches we were going to do because of this new garden that's going to go in, and we would use those as evaluation opportunities. But there are other places where the big trench out in the front of the building directly need for that. But you can only get so far with the non-invasive stuff, and an appropriate excavation that only deals with part of the resource. You know, what you learn from compromising that sample just, you know, allows you to really understand what the rest of the remote stuff is doing for you, and it all clicks together. And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things where we're really pleased with about so much of the work the Great British Dig has done actually, is that quite often we've looked at several sites which have never been looked at archaeologically previously. Not Beningbrough, but a lot of the programs look at sites that have never been excavated previously or looked at really at all. And in what the Great British Dig's been able to do really is look at some of those sites which otherwise wouldn't receive attention and actually sample them, evaluate them as we would call it archaeologically, to help understand the resource and that's there, the archaeology that's there. And actually what that does, yes, we're destroying a little piece of it, but actually it does allow for management and better care of all the rest of it. And I think actually that's one of the things that's a real strength of the programme, is that we've now been able to do that for 14 different places, which is lovely.
I like to think of it as keyhole surgery.
Yeah.
Oh, very good, definitely. So I'm slightly worried about your keyhole surgery, which you're one of the most enthusiastic people with a shovel I've seen for a long time, and effective.
Not very clean either.
And actually, we did have a comment here on the live stream chat from Phil. Thank you, Phil, for your comment or question, actually. And it goes, "Hi all, a great dig. Anything in particular that made you conclude that the brick wall was a revetment to a sunken garden rather than just being a ha-ha on the slope?" So Chris first and then maybe Mark after.
Yeah. So I think number one, a few things altogether. Number one, Mark said so.
Enough said, really, Chris. I just stopped there, Phil. You know, you've got your answer now.
Number two, again, there was some explanation of this in the programme in a lovely chat that Chloe and Mark had, but it was really very clear about the two very, very different sequences of deposits either side of that wall, showing that one set of deposits had been placed against it, and then at a completely different time, another set of deposits had been placed on the other side. And it was quite clear that those two didn't match, and you had two different things going on, two different sets of events going on each side of that wall.
Because there was a great revelation moment when Chris and I were standing at the side of the trench and looking at the floor of the thing, and it had gone down quite deep, and we had the sections that you saw in the programme, and I just said, are we seeing natural anywhere in this trench? And there was a pause, and then there was the no. And although, you know, we got on nicely with that trench, it was nowhere near the bottom, and I don't know that the edit entirely drew that out, but the implication is that those deposits are going down deeper. Really nice idea, Phil, about the ha-ha. I think the position argues against that we do have ha-has at Beningbrough, particularly going all the way around the house, really, but especially on the south side. And what you want to achieve with that is looking over a contrasting landscape. So daintily arranged and carefully shampooed sheep and cattle and things that make the landscape look interesting are over there and not eating the roses. Where that wall was is actually, it's kind of a big rectangular garden space around the hall, and this was inside the rectangle and about 2/3 of the way up, but looking towards the narrow end to the north. So it's not on a drop where a ha-ha would be of any value. There isn't the grazing land immediately outside it, and it lined up with the facade of the building. So in that position, we did think through what's the explanation of this feature, but the conclusion is that actually there was a high steep slope, and in fact the wall's not at the top of it, and I would imagine would have been a relationship with the top of it had been the ha-ha. It was part way down the slope, so that was kind of the reasoning why that wasn't the direction we took the interpretation in.
And it is a good question, isn't it? Because it's very difficult for that to come across on the screen. Yeah. Where it is in relation to everything else. So it's a good one to ask, I think. Do you know, I actually was, it was almost like birthing a horse. I had my arm down that wall because it was filling with water. So I was trying to find the bottom of it. So, it was quite nice because it was so hot, but I spent a lot of time do you remember this, Chris?
Yeah. We
were both sticking our hands in and trying to find the bottom.
It was beautifully cool down there. I wanted to climb in.
My wife's currently working with one of the Yorkshire vets on another television programme, and so let us know if you come across those circumstances again. We've got a man with previous experience in the field.
Pre 5-year-old Chloe wanted to be James Herriot, so I've always wanted to.
It's another tick on the bucket list, isn't it?
I should have told you that, actually. I feel. Moving on.
And just quickly, Phil just responded saying thank you. He couldn't get his head around the orientation of the wall relative to the house. So that's great. Maybe to talk about that. Again, it's only 47 minutes, and being able, it's such a skill to wrap that all up into that amount of time. And Phil actually did ask this earlier, saying, do you get a preview of the final cut before it's aired? So, Solstice Heritage.
Yes, we do. So there's a whole team. There's an amazing production company, Strawberry Blond, who basically this is their project really, and we're just a part of it. Who ultimately they are the storytellers here, and they're bringing together all of our work as a whole team, and then having to make from hundreds of hours of filming 47 minutes. So there's a whole team of fantastic editors and producers who are chopping that down to get from a massive footage to 47 minutes. We are involved in that process, and there is all the way through the program, right from looking at where we might go and take the program to what site, all the way through to sort of the nuts and bolts of fine-tuning the 47 minutes. Archaeologists are involved in that whole process, which is amazing, and a real credit to Strawberry Blonde that they'll let us, for a start. But it's yeah, we see that all the way through, and we do the very best that we can to make sure the archaeology is represented appropriately and is, you know, is able to tell its own story. But at the end of the day as well, there are a group of professional TV professionals who want to make sure that we tell a good and engaging story, which is just as important, really.
Yeah.
That we enthuse people with in the past and in the archaeology of these places we go. So it is a joint effort.
Yeah, and all, you know, every credit to everyone who's involved. I mean, I thought it made a great program, a really great program. And, you know, you can pull out these details. There are so many more details we would have got to, but the episode was a victim of its own success, if you want to call it a victim in that regard. And the reality is when we had so many different moving parts, recognizing that with garden archaeology, the archaeology might not turn up. Or it might not be televisual, even if it was interesting in the whole. And the reality is component after component after component paid off in trumps. And it gave us a richness of stuff which you didn't dare hope for. So, you know, then drawing that back into 47 minutes, I mean, you know, there were half a dozen different moving parts of his story, most of which were, not even all of them were on there in the end. You'd have happily done 20-25 minutes of interesting stuff on each of them. Yeah. But oddly enough, they weren't commissioning a mini-series. So,
who knows?
What was your favourite bit though, Mark?
I don't know that I can pull it apart because the whole was so good. And I mean, I have done some media interviews in the run up to the broadcast, and it was just the whole thing was so great. I mean, if you really push me hard, then I would struggle to pick between the new water feature out to the north or the revetment wall. The revetment wall, you know, Chris pulling my leg a minute ago about this, you know, I've had my eye on that slope and trying to figure out what it's been doing for the best part of 2 decades. And I've always thought that's more interesting than it appears. And it's not the world's most interesting slope by any means. And that really pulled into focus. You know, I think we're right about this being a retaining structure. I think we're right about it going down a lot deeper. And that means there is a really significant late 17th, early 18th century garden there to be revealed. And that is, that, you know, when your hunch pays off, that's something to really remember.
Well, it was so lovely working with you because you were so enthusiastic all the time. You were just bouncing from one trench to another, being gleeful, and it would just brought all of us up as well. You know, it's just like, oh, this is really great. We're really pleasing in here. Let's do it.
But that's where we all ought to be at in this business, isn't it? You know, I think you talk to students about a career in archaeology, and that's the thing. And I think kind of really high up on the list is, if you're not enjoying it, accountancy is a very rewarding profession. You know, we've got to love this. And I think it's easy in any job, even in a job you love, to get sucked into the boring stuff and the bad days. And, you know, when you are presented with beautiful days, exciting, interesting people who are just as happy about everything that they're doing, and it comes up with the goods, you know, that's what makes life worthwhile.
You know, I remember made a few jokes way before we had actually seen a deposit to definitely say it was a pond or a water feature. I would be like, oh, this is a pond. And you were like, that'll be great. And then when we found out, yeah, it's a water feature, oh my goodness, I can't believe how excited you were. I was like, okay, this is good. Okay, because I thought you were going to be sad. I was like, oh, this is good news. Woo! Yeah. Okay.
Well, it was Phil Barker in the textbook Techniques in Archaeological Excavation, who, was a thing that an excavation's result is not merely an expression of a director's prejudice. And I think that's the thing. It's go with what the stuff is really telling you rather than try and make it be the thing that you wanted it to be at the outset. Oh. And, I mean, it was a bit of I thought we were genuinely onto some trace of the building. I mean, we knew that the LiDAR stuff was further over to the east-west than we had, you would have expected it to be, but it's that business of how do you translate paintings. And the conversations that I had with Chris in the pre-startup things was, well, maybe there is a cellar under the west side of the building, and what we're seeing is it's settling into that, and that the east sides didn't have that sub-level, and that's what we'd be coming across.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the way it panned out, and we could have been stuck with the thing with clay lining showing up in section and going, well, that looks like a water feature, but you aced it, Tash, and you got a water supply and you filled the thing up as well. I mean, there's no real arguing it's a pond, but I mean that was something else, which was really, because although that landscape is pretty flat, where you were was kind of the top of it. So one of those really interesting things to look at next is, where is that water supply coming from? Because topographically, you wouldn't have expected that at all. I mean, they may find out that's why the water rates are so high on the Hall, because we've been losing 1,000 gallons a day into a hole in the ground. But no, I mean, and that's the thing, that there were so, we achieved so much, but it's left us with really clear next steps to explore. And the exploration of Beningbrough is going to go on from here, standing on the shoulders of giants.
We are the giants.
Yeah, that's precisely what I had in mind.
Just to make sure there's clarification, yes.
Yeah, definitely.
By the way, that just reminds me, in the VO, Hugh's like, we're getting the big digger in. And I'm like, that's not a big digger. But, that's like one of the smallest ones you can get. I love it.
I kind of wondered if that was a furlough thing. He's kind of forgotten what a big digger looks like. That's a big digger.
I quite liked the end line where he just teases Richard about we knew it was there because it was in the painting. Poor Richard. He's not here to defend himself. So. Yeah.
But I thought,
you might see it as the series goes on, that this little rivalry between Hugh and Richard, it gets quite intense at points. I think at King's Lynn it was at a head. There's a conversation about football that I think might have made the edit.
Oh no.
But yeah, I thought that was to be honest, that was a great little storyline in the programme. And I think, as Mark's pointed out, actually it's lovely that's reflected in the programme, because that was an outcome of Mark's work in terms of looking at the LiDAR before the programme. It was something that he and I talked about, and that came through into the design of the work that we did on the programme, and the trench that you dug, Tash. But also it shows that archaeology is about testing theories and progressing knowledge, in that turned out to be something that we didn't expect. And then obviously the work moved on, and we tested not just the LiDAR, but then we tested the painting itself as a form of evidence. And again, which is great, that is the way to move things forward, is to constantly test these forms of evidence. We did that in Falkirk as well with Chloe's gorilla trench, that we tested one area and one projection, and then we refined our ideas and tested another area. And again, and in that program as well, that really turned up trumps. So it's nice, again, as an archaeologist, to allow people to see the kind of how ideas change through the work that we do. and asking those questions and trying to answer them, and that leads you inevitably to another question.
Just to clarify there, Chris, you meant gorilla as in like, not in like.
No. Option one.
Having not been in Falkirk, I was running a series of mental images. And
I think it's quite a rude way to talk about me. I know I dug hard, but there are limits to what this woman can handle.
I just images of you picking fleas off Hugh's back.
Definitely option one. Sneaky trench.
And actually, Chris, what you just said, okay, bar what you actually said, just before what you said. Anyway, it's so interesting because obviously we have our theories, and we're telling the public about what we're doing, why we're there, and then you've got Marcus who's actually able to produce images, whether that be from the models from the actual building to a fragment to what the vessel might have looked like. Like, Marcus, how is that experience for you? Because you're actually illustrating what we're trying to describe, and no one really ever understands what we're saying, and your tool is actually one of the most important. So how does that feel for you to be able to see what you're producing and see something like on TV as well for the public to enjoy? And it's been shared by, for example, National Trust Twitter account today, they were sharing the image of it as well. And just to think that will heighten people's understanding and appreciation for not only Beningbrough Hall itself, but for archaeology and the different various techniques.
Yeah, it's brilliant because it's essentially putting all the pieces together, isn't it? So it's essentially something that hasn't necessarily been visualized if you think about like the site and all the information that's coming out. In a sense, I know when you guys dig up stuff, you're the first person to see the sherd or whatever in so many hundreds, if not thousands of years, depending on the site we're digging. And then, because when we put the vessel together and create it, albeit a digital visualization, then you sort of see something else. You see the complete vessel as it may have been. And the same when you start to build up a landscape or the garden and stuff, you're starting to put, because the great thing is that we can change the perspective. So unlike a painting or a sketch or an etching or something like that, we can't actually move through it. But we can with the digital, so we can actually pass through, we can get like different vistas, different viewpoints and things like that. So it's really engaging. And I know we did the VR in the last one, didn't we, with the virtual reality? We could stand there with the goggles. We can pretty much do that with most of the models once we've got them built, is actually create a virtual reality version where you can actually put yourself in that garden or in that space within the site and look around. So those sorts of things, just because of it, I think it makes the heritage more real. It makes it feel real, and I think it makes people engage with it in a different way, rather than just seeing, a pot in a museum or something. It doesn't have the context that you can get when you do things digitally. So yeah, I find it fascinating. I learn something new every time I do it, actually. So and it's because every site's different, and all the material that comes up is different. So and the time pressures and things like that to actually try and get it done and things like that. So it's challenging, but rewarding at the same time.
But I think there's something really interesting in that about communication in archaeology, because Chloe was just nice enough to say, my enthusiasm and happiness about what was going on came through and bounced off people. And it kind of leads you into, I think, an archaeologist who is a good communicator on a site or in a talk carries people with them by waving their hands about. So I wave my hands about a lot when I talk. I like to think it's one of the things I'm good at. And it brings people in, it engages them, it makes them feel positive about the subject. But at the end of the day, they're waving hands. And what your skills bring into the equation is an expression of that communication of what things mean, but into something that's not being mediated through the hand waver, but is actually a direct first-hand experience. Now, for those that don't know anything about 17th century gardens or how archaeology could lead you to it, they kind of get that it's interesting, exciting, and there's a vanished ghost of a life here to be recovered, but you're showing them who the ghost was before they died. And I think that's really interesting. It's about ownership of understanding. Is that something that chimes with you, Chloe, and what you've experienced with the public and archaeology?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, I mean, also just through looking at some of Marcus's visualizations, I think the ones at Stretton, particularly where there's a sense of kind of, I have an image in my head, I suppose, but there's something about seeing it. Yeah, I think it's how you convey that knowledge, and it's through movement as well, because they're not static, as you said, Marcus, and you move through these things. And when you're waving your hands around, that's about movement as well, isn't it? It's dynamic. The past is dynamic, and it's exciting, and you can't get that from something that's flat and still in the same way. You have to have that movement. So if you can move through a visualization, it's amazing. Yeah. And
you get to put Hugh Dennis in prison. Well, that might have to have been satisfying.
Plus, in Devices, you drew a perfect circle. You just sat there and went, "Oh, it looks like this."
Yeah.
I was told that wasn't good enough and it wouldn't make the edit. I was just trying to explain what the prison looked like, and apparently I drew a nice circle, which is cool.
I don't know if people, I don't know, like try and draw a perfect circle, because it's not easy.
The Google Glasses thing is fantastic, because on the one end of the technological scale, I have this aspiration for producing these engravings of Beningbrough, but also I was talking to Radio York about it, how great it would be to have the Google Glasses experience, so that you can go and walk through the 17th century garden on the site. I'd love to get that there, and maybe we'll have you back for Festival of British Archaeology and people can walk in that bit.
Yeah, why not?
Do you think, having done that visualization for the Great British Dig, if we hopefully could get another series, would you say you might have made a bit of a rod for your own back there, Marcus?
Yeah, I think I might get asked to do it again. So partially it depends on the site. So the garden site would work really well, because you can put yourself actually surrounded by the garden and move through it. Probably actually, so we could have done it at Falkirk. We could have stood in the centre of the bowling green and film all the way around. So I think it might come back. I just wanted to try it to see how successful it was, but it's certainly something that we can do as a leave behind on a potential website, because we can host those. And as I say, it's only a couple of pounds for the cardboard thing that you put your phone into, or you could spend up to £20 and have a really flash one like the one I've got. But they're not prohibitively expensive, so people can actually use their phones and go through. So that's something that we can actually retrofit to a lot of the models that we've got. So we could do a Stretton one quite happily. That was the first one I was intending to do. We can do the garden one. We've already got the prison one. We could do a Falkirk one. I mean, and now I'm just making more work for myself.
No, but it'd be quite, with the Beningbrough example, with the LiDAR material we've got for the elements of the garden that are outside the present down into the field, because it's all geospatial. It feels like that's something that should be able to slot together with this material. And, I don't think we should be encouraging people to walk off the and that could be a bad thing to have happen, but, kind of viewing
Personally,
point inside it that, with a headset would be.
I would encourage people to stand still and look around.
Yeah. I think it's the way to go.
So you could pick viewpoints in the landscape and you would stand still and have a 360-degree view of that. I wouldn't encourage people to walk around with no vision.
No. You could do it like this, though, couldn't you? So that people could go and see, here it is now, and then here it is in the past. Ooh, that would be cool.
So that's one of the options we had. We actually had that at Devices. So you could stand at that location and just hold your phone up, and where your phone was pointing, it would show the reconstruction. So you could compare now and then the reconstruction. And then of course there's an inbuilt button that switches it to the VR, which you then put into the VR. So you do have that as a default anyway. So yeah.
Years ago, when iPads were still a new thing, and I'd like to think of myself as an early adopter, and I've still got me a 10-year-old one somewhere. One of the heritage agencies in Melbourne produced an app which had a collection of historical photographs of early Melbourne buildings, which have then disappeared through, again, the GPS referencing. You got to the right point in the tour, and you could, looking through the pad, then do an overlay with the historic photography out on the site. That was really, that was a terrific thing at the time. I mean, talking to someone with your expertise, it's kind of, yeah, well, you get these two sticks and you rub them together and you can make fire. That's stuck with me.
It's a very good point. I should just mention that with this, you don't even need an app. It's all embedded in the web page code. So you don't need to download an app. You just need to visit the website and select the visualization, and then it's all there. The instructions are all there and ready to go. So you don't need to download anything. It's just completely self-sufficient. Just go to the website, bam, there it is. So that's also very simple. I like to keep these things as simple as possible.
It'd be very cool if there was like a signpost. So for example, in Beningbrough Hall, you could have like a place that you stand and like a little QR code. So just get your phone, take a photo, it automatically pops up to the website.
Yeah, we just link into that particular presentation on a web host somewhere. Yeah.
So February.
I was having a conversation the other day with a colleague about QR codes, and they went, "Oh, you can't do QR codes. It excludes too many people." Blah, blah. And I said, and the meeting went on, and I did a little bit of Googling, and then I came back and I said, "Oh, that's interesting, because I think the latest statistics is 17% of the UK population are functionally illiterate, but 89% of them have smartphones." So basically what we're saying is we should go over entirely onto QR codes, and which produces stuff that talks to people, because the written word is redundant on the basis of how much of the population it reaches. I don't think we're quite ready for that cultural change yet, but it is interesting how far it's become ubiquitous, and it's a way forward, definitely.
I mean, Facebook, now called Meta, has invested a lot of money into the metaverse. So I'm just saying, in a few years, you can just be at home and around a trust site. Marcus, you have a lot of money. You'll make money from this. The new digital age.
I'm an archaeology. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm working on archaeology.
Well, I just realised we've come up to the hour mark. So there's one last question that I will ask. And actually, I was going to ask anyway, but the National Trust, hello, National Trust North of England account. And it's from Joe and Sue. Hello, Joe and Sue. Is it Sue that was in the episode by any chance?
Yep, that's right.
Oh, Sue, that was an amazing slow motion trowel throw there with the swirl just going beautifully into the swirl. I was like, that is gorgeous. I loved it. So we need to get that. I'll cut it down. I'll send you on Instagram, because I just was like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. I want a slow mo trowel flick. Beautiful. Anyway, sorry, I'll answer the question. So this will be the last question. And it's a very important one, and that is, if you had the choice, what would you do next to confirm, deepen, or challenge the understanding of Beningbrough's history? In other words, what's the next stage for archaeological investigations?
Wow, that's a good one. It's Miss Sunken Garden and the retaining wall for me. I'd love to have the opportunity to dig deeper, to get down to the bottom of that sequence and see the whole lot across that profile, because that's a real game changer for understanding the layout of the site at all sorts of different periods. So just going to pick one, I think it would be that. If I was going to be greedy and pick another wonderful new geophysics that let us pick up even more in the stuff outside the ha-ha, because the work we've done with Bradford University in the past, as over the years, as the equipment has become more sophisticated and the sensitivity has gone up, there is so much that you can learn out there, and that would be the next one on my list. But it's a long list for Beningbrough. There's so much opportunity to do good and exciting things there, and I hope we get a chance to do it.
Give us a call if you do. I'll bring an army of students from Newcastle.
I'll take you at your word on that, Chloe. It would be a delight.
And by the way, Marcus, message from a National Trust. They said, Marcus, let's keep this conversation going. We love the idea. So there you go.
There you go. Well,
you're digging yourself into more work.
I am. I know. But that's fine. I like doing that.
Oh, there's so much more we could discuss tonight. Again, now you understand what I'm saying about garden archaeology. It's more interesting than I honestly ever thought. And that's Mark right there. Thank you so much for being so
pleasure
and supportive and helping us and keeping that momentum going. And we're all like, is this okay? Are we happy with what we're finding? And you're like, it's fascinating, it's brilliant. And the editors, series producer, shout out to Audrey as well. Like, it's amazing what you have done and helped shape the story, as Chris mentioned earlier. It's just a beautiful piece. And I don't know how the editors, I don't know how you're able to cut down this episode, and actually any episode, because we are so enthusiastic and like happy about anything and everything sometimes. And we're deeply like saddened as well. That never really makes the cut, obviously. They wants to see an angry Tash on TV, or just disappointed Tash, do they? So that never makes the cut. But just being able to see all those emotions on screen sometimes, it's been awesome. This is only episode 4. There's another 6 to go of series 2. And Mark, hopefully we can see you again somewhere. I mean, as you said, you are technically the archaeologist for the north of England, so.
Well, I have a project up my sleeve potentially for you if you want to come and play somewhere else.
Yeah.
Something very exciting. Tree blown down in Storm Arwen has shown us something interesting.
Ooh. Nobody else take our idea who's watching this. Okay, we better wrap this up because we've hit the hour mark. Thank you all so much for joining us. We will be back on Ep4 on Saturday at 8 p.m. You can catch up anytime on all 4. You have to be based in the UK to do so. And what's else?
Get a VPN.
Yes. Hence why you've got to be based in the UK. See, you've got to read between the lines. Like all archaeologists do. And what else? Oh yeah, next week we go to West Derby in Liverpool. It's a beautiful episode. Again, community spirit is just there, a different aspect, as we're kind of central, a bit like the one in Devices where everyone's kind of around us. So this one's a really fun one as well. There was a lot of public engagement. We literally were off a main road, and
50 million school children.
Oh my god, like because we were right next to a school as well. when it was at 10 past 3, all of us like, oh no, it's 10 past 3, okay, right, let's get ready. Okay, the kids are coming. Like every day.
Yeah.
We would like make sure we weren't filming as well around that time, so we could just chat to them and things like that. So that was good fun. We learned that one on day 1, didn't we? But again, thank you all so much for tuning in, and that's enough of this live stream. We'll see you next Thursday. So thank you and have a lovely evening. Check the links in the description below for the more information about National Trust Beningbrough Hall. Bye everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.